Hello, everyone. This is Mara from Smart Training. Today, I'm very excited because we have a special collaboration with Kendall from California. Here in a second, she's going to tell us a little bit more about herself. And all my people in Latin America, if you still don't follow her, go and do it right now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kendall. I am a personal dance trainer and dance scientist based out of Los Angeles, California. I work with dancers of all ages and I help them enhance their dance technique and performance through strength and flexibility training. And I offer virtual one-on-one sessions, in-person sessions, and then online educational classes to help educate the dance community in regards to safe dance practices.
Thank you so much for accepting the invitation. And now let's go ahead and reveal the topic for today's conversation. The topic is unsafe practices on social media, and Kendall and I are very passionate about this topic. We are very careful in social media with the things that we post, the things that we say, and we want people to reach their best potential, but we want them to do it in a safe way. So, in order to do this, we decided that the best way to talk about this was to show you some examples and then talk more about what are the dangers, why it's unsafe. And we're gonna start with this first picture. And let me tell you that I have seen this so many times in so many different ways because people are very creative. So this is one way, but I have also seen it with a foam roller and I have also seen it with a foot stretcher. So, Kendall, do you want to start with this one?
So first of all, I just want to preface kind of our discussion today about all of these stretches or like exercises that we see. I don't want to say that there's like any like good and bad. Like I don't want to label them as like good and bad exercises, but there's definitely like better ways to do stretches. And especially if you're just copying things that you see on social media without any regards to what it's actually doing to your body and what your body needs or just your own anatomy of your body, then that's when injuries can happen. So that's why it's important to talk about these things too. And with this first one, with this kind of forcing your ankle and foot into this overarched position, I was talking about this recently, just the ideal aesthetic of wanting like strong feet and a better point and a higher releve and all of these things that honestly, and this is probably an unpopular opinion, but those things do not make you a better dancer. Sorry, just flat out like that is the least thing you should be worried about when it comes to like wanting to improve your technique in my opinion. And the reason why something like this is unsafe for a lot of individuals, especially like younger individuals, is because we're forcing our ankle joint, which are two bones that are connecting to each other, into an overstretched position. Now, if you're thinking about the joint, that has to do with bones. There's no muscles that are crossing that joint. It's tendons and ligaments that are all going into, and fascia that are all going into the ankle joint, or any joint for that matter. So when we're talking about stretching, we're referring to muscles, and when we're talking about like mobility, we're referring to like the joint itself. So when you're stretching this ankle into a very extended position, you might feel a bit of a stretch like in the upper ankle, kind of into your shin where you do actually have muscles, but you're not actually doing anything for the ankle joint itself other than stretching out the ligaments, which we don't want to do. We don't want to stretch out our ligaments because if we start to overstretch our ligaments, that's when we can actually decrease our ankle stability and actually put yourself at higher risk for injury. If you were standing on one leg trying to balance and your ankle starts to wobble, you could easily fall and sprain your ankle. But if you had more stronger ligaments there, then you might not sprain your ankle. You might be able to recover. You might be able to stop your ankle from wobbling, things like that.
Yes, exactly. And I think that part of the problem is because a lot of times dancers and teachers don't really understand what's going on inside their body. And they're just doing the exercises that we've been passing through generation without really getting into detail about what's going on inside. So I want to say that ligaments are there to protect or to help support the joints. And when we overstretch, we are taking the joint past its natural physiological range and we're stretching those ligaments. And as you said before, this could make the joint very unstable. If you stretch a muscle, it goes out and it comes back. But if you stretch a ligament, it doesn't come back. So that's why it's very unsafe. So this is why when someone comes to me and tells me, "Hey, I want to improve my point range," the first question that I ask is why. Because it makes sense to me if you are going to the point and maybe you don't have the range for that. So I get it, you want to improve it. But a lot of times I have clients that have beautiful lines and their foot it's already 180 and they want more. So I ask them why. And I think that the reason is just because they say it looks cool.
Literally, that's it. That's the only reason. Because how is that going to actually help you like be a better dancer? It's probably not.
Right? And another thing that makes noise in my head is when I see these group videos on social media or when I see a teacher applying that exercise with their class of 10 dancers. And I wonder what are the chances that one tool or one exercise is going to help your 10 students in the class? Because every foot is different. So the restriction might be coming from a different area and your stretch is only doing one area. So that part is like not logic to me. Some people don't even need a stretch, some people need a fascial release. Another to say that most dancers have issues with control and strength. And this is why I want to show you this exercise because a lot of times when we have a restriction, we realize that the issue doesn't even come from that area. It comes from somewhere else because everything is connected. So I'm going to show you this exercise. And even though it might not be helpful for everyone, I can tell you that it's not going to hurt anyone. Like glute strength is not going to hurt you.
I was gonna suggest that as that muscle there, which I often find is actually not as strong for dancers because we're so used to going into releve or just like demi point in general. So usually we have very strong calves, but not very strong tibialis anterior or the muscles like the perineals on the side of the lower leg too. And I feel like there's a lack of education in the dance community when it comes to ankle and foot exercises. I feel like we're just doing releves in parallel, releves in first, releves in second, which is all working the same muscle. Like it's not really that big of a difference between like parallel and first, and just maybe activating a couple more muscles. So yeah, I think training the whole ankle is what's actually going to help you. And something I also wanted to say is there might be a bit of confusion as to why we're talking about the ankle, but then showing an exercise for your glutes. And that is something that a lot of dancers or dance teachers don't actually realize, that everything is connected there. That's how I like to explain it, is like your glutes, your hamstrings, your calf, like everything affects, like you said, everything affects each other. So if you can go up on releve and you're using your calf muscles, which are the muscles that are primarily pointing your foot, but you don't have strong enough glutes or strong enough hamstrings to actually maintain balance, then it's not going to be a matter of, oh, you need to strengthen your ankles more. Like it's not going to be that. It's going to be, you need to strengthen your glutes and hamstrings so you can actually stay balanced and use the whole posterior chain. So that's another great example of one dancer might need more glute strengthening, another one might actually need more calf strengthening. So it just depends on your body.
Okay, let's move into picture number 2. In this picture, we can clearly see that the intention is to create a hyperextended knee. In reality, there's a lot of people advocating extreme training without even knowing the long-term trouble they might be causing. And the thing is, I don't even know who told you this, but this you don't have to do this. I think that a lot of people truly believe that in order to be a professional dancer, this is part of it, and it is not. Hypermobility can be a blessing and it's also a nightmare because extreme mobility requires more control. Kendall, what do you think about it?
Yeah, so I think the blessing part comes from just the like looking cool or the like aesthetic reasons behind it. But I'm not a hypermobility, hyperextension like expert, but I do have some experience with it, like working with dancers. And I also can, if you're listening to this and want more information on that, I can point you into a better direction, more resources. But essentially, like hypermobility can cause a lot of issues in terms of proprioception, in terms of joint stability. Those are probably the two biggest things that I see, and overall like body awareness that goes along with proprioception. So proprioception is like being able to sense where your body is in space. So if you bring your arm out to the side here and say you're hypermobile, if your whole body's hypermobile, maybe, you may not have a sense of like how far away your hand is from the center of your body. Or I've seen it also in like in group dances, and you don't have any like spatial awareness. So maybe you're dancing like right next to someone, and you think you're like far away. You don't even really notice it. So that's another way that it can kind of show up. But I have a friend who is hypermobile, in her entire body, like very extreme hypermobility, and it's caused her like a lot of issues too. So now she's an advocate for it, and she's a dancer, so she's an advocate for safer practices there too. So I think that the like aesthetic or the like the just the desire to have hyperextension is something that's really, it's really an outdated belief, I guess, in ballet dancers. Like, sure, it makes your line look very nice, but you can still have a very nice line without having hyperextended knees. And a lot of dancers do have hyperextended knees, unfortunately, just from like unsafe practices growing up. And I've also seen a lot of like ballet companies or just like very serious like training centers that are teaching their like 7 and 8 year olds these unsafe practices and pushing them down into stretches, or teaching them that they need to be like straightening behind their knees or locking their knees, and teaching that to them from a young age. And then that dancer grows up thinking there's no other way, or just thinking like that's just the way it is in ballet, and if I'm going to become a professional dancer, this is what I have to do. So it's that that like safety, or in regard to safety practice, that dancers are not really up to date with, and a lot of dance teachers aren't. So I would like to think that that it's a little bit more well known now, but there's still a very, very big population in the dance community that is not even aware of it, or who is aware but doesn't care.
Yes, and I think that people really believe that hyperextension comes from dancing. When the truth is that a lot of people that are already hypermobile feel attracted to dance or this type of disciplines because it's easy on them. And when I say easy, I mean the position, the ranges. But it's actually harder because they don't have the strength, they don't have the control, the joint is not stable. So a lot of times you're gonna see these dancers in beautiful pictures. But when they're dancing, there's something off. And the reason is because they don't have the strength to actually show you the full range of motion. or they don't have the agility because they're a little bit slow in putting one movement into the next step because of the same reason, the lack of strength. So we see these pictures all the time in social media, and teachers say, I want my students to do that. And that's why, in such a young age, they're pushing these kids into these stretches because of the idea of what we see.
And even if you have, I see this a lot too, dancers who have a lot of trouble straightening their legs because they straightening their knees because they either have tight hamstrings or tight calves. Um, I've seen a lot of these same stretches and like forcing the hyperextended or just like forcing like the straighter knees concept into these dancers that don't have the physiological makeup to do that. And in a better way of doing that would be like mobility work, active stretching, even strengthening too for those muscles. So things like that, where you're doing other practices that are going to be better and safer for them, and not just safer, but like longer lasting too. I mean, you could try to like push the knee down and do that stretch, the stretch that we're talking about. You could try to do that for someone who like has trouble straightening their knees. And like maybe sure, if you hold it for 2 minutes, then yeah, their knee's going to get straighter. But when they stand up, they're not going to be able to maintain it. When they an hour later, when they've gone home, they're not going to be able to maintain it. So like it's really not doing anything but stretching them in the short term, but putting unnecessary stress on those joints, because like you don't want to be pushing on someone's joints ever. If you have if you're working with a professional and they are like assisting you in a stretch, that's different. Like giving them an extra, like an extra resistance or something like that in a stretch, that's different than forcing them down into a stretch or putting their foot on their leg in a wall stretch or something like that. So yeah, I think it's very outdated approach, but definitely still needs more attention because it's still so predominant in the dance community.
Okay, moving into picture number 3. Just keep in mind that this is just an example, and we don't only see it in a straddle position, we also see it in splits.
Using a chair or like 10 blocks to put their leg up in the air, all sorts of things. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yes. And even if they have the ability or the range to put the leg up there, it's not stable. Like you can see their hips like wobbling.
Literally can't hold it. And then if you go and step on the crease of their hip with your foot, that's your hip is also a joint. You're putting more stress on an unstable joint, and gravity is already pulling their hips down towards the floor. So that's a force that's pulling them down. Then their body weight is pulling them down towards the floor. That's an added, like compounded force that's bringing you down. Now you're putting your foot on their hip or their back or whatever is, wherever you're putting your foot or your hands or whatever, like extra resistance you're adding, that's more weight of pushing them down to the floor. So that's where it becomes dangerous, really, is. And if you, so say you're doing like this split, this straddle position here, I mean, you might think that you're stretching the hips, but if someone could feel that more in like their inner thighs, they could feel it more in their hamstrings. Someone might feel it more like in their calves because the feet are flexed around the band like that. And so it's not always going to have the same result that as a teacher you might be intending, or even as a dancer, like seeing these stretches or on social media or anything. It might not have the same effect on your body because maybe you already have pretty open hips and pretty mobile hips. And so you don't feel a stretch at all, like that could be that too. That doesn't mean that it's not dangerous if you don't feel a stretch. It still can be dangerous because you might have mobile hips, but they might not be very stable. You might not feel very strong in like a one-legged position or something like that. So it's definitely it's definitely something that I see all the time. And I think when I come into studios and teach master classes and they know it's going to be like strength and flexibility work, we honestly do more strength than flexibility. We maybe do like a few strength flexibility exercises, but I think that they expect to do like these crazy things because I usually have them like have everyone use a resistance band and a yoga block. And we don't really use the yoga block for stretching. We use it for other like strength exercises. So I think that they're a little surprised that they can still use their flexibility, but not have to sit and stretch for 30 minutes before they do a leap across the floor. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, but that's just one example.
And something else that I want to say about this is that doing these practices are not safe, but especially for younger students, because imagine damage in the hip joint when you are growing. That can mean long-term issues in this area. So instead of helping you to achieve your goals, it might even prevent you from getting there. But people don't want to listen when you list the consequences, because a lot of times these consequences are not visible in day one or day two, but later on in the years. And with this being said, I feel like I have to say that I'm not against extreme mobility when achieved safely. I think that a lot of times we focus on flexibility training and we totally forget strength training. And these two things go together.
I totally agree. They should go hand in hand. And especially when it comes to like corrective exercise too, like it's both of those things plus mobility training. But as dancers, like, I mean, we want to dance. We're learning how to dance. We're focused. We should be focused on like more artistic elements and things like that. But in order to achieve those artistic elements, you need a technical foundation that is strong enough to allow you to do whatever the choreographer wants you to do, whatever demands come up in class or in rehearsal or on stage. Anything that comes up there, you need to be able to adapt to that choreography or to those demands. But if you're not strong enough to do that, you're going to really struggle. And that's when it could be a matter of like making or breaking like the audition, or anything, whatever the end goal is, or an injury. And so that's why it's so important too. It's not just so you can look cool while you're taking a photo. I mean, yeah, it does look cool. Like, I'll admit it does look cool. I wish I could do that when I was younger too, but it's not going to make you a better dancer, and it's not going to be safe on your body in 10 years time.
The consequences are what really get me, because I don't have hyperextended knees, but I do have hyperextension in my elbow, and I have an idea of the pain. There are times that I go to bed, and if I'm very tired, I'm not really aware of what my body is doing. So there are times that I wake up in the middle of the night because I realize that my arm has been hanging from the bed in that position. And I wake up in such a pain. I cannot bend my elbow. And what I have to do is literally with my other hand, grab my arm, count 1 to 3, and force it to bend, because my own muscles are not responding to bring me back into the position.
Actually, that reminds me, like what you just said. If you are like holding stretches for a long period of time, or if you are doing an overstretch where you really can't do it, but you're like forcing your body to do it anyway. And then if you try to stand up afterwards, you're like, you literally need to use your hands to get out of the stretch, or need to like slowly and carefully like step out of the stretch or stand up. That is a very clear sign that you were either stretching too long or doing a stretch that was unsafe for your body. Because it's literally, the reason why is because when you are holding a stretch for a long time, or when you're overstretching, you are, and your muscles are being stretched, yes, but you're actually inhibiting, at a certain point, you're inhibiting those muscles to be able to contract efficiently, because your muscles will squeeze and stretch, contract and relax. So when we are in a relaxed state for too long, and you're forcing your muscles into that when they might not be ready to do that, they might not have that actual like flexibility in the muscles, then you're inhibiting the ability for it to contract afterwards when you stand up. So that's why when you're in class and you're stretching for 30 minutes, and then you get up and start doing like batmas across the floor, it's gonna feel hard. It's gonna feel harder for you to do it if you had only done like some dynamic flexibility work or even some strength training. It's gonna feel way easier. And that is the goal, because you're actually strengthening to be able to like maintain those skills for a longer period of time, rather than just having to stretch for 30 minutes in order to do a batma. Like, it should not be like that.
Yes, and this is why I'm showing you guys this next exercise. And believe me, you're never gonna go wrong with getting someone stronger.
Actually, I've never done that before. I've never done that exercise before, but it's a great one because you're utilizing the stability and the strength of the standing side or the supporting side, and then doing an active stretch on the other side. Like, that very much mimics like if you were to stand up and do like a développé a la Sakan. You're standing on one leg, you're having to stabilize on that standing leg, and then you're actively using the flexibility on the other leg. So I love that. That's a great one. I'm gonna have to add it to my repertoire.
Yes, of course, this is why we're sharing. Now, moving on, picture number 5. You can see in this picture that they're using a resistance band. A lot of times they tie the resistance band in a different surface, like the bar, and you pretty much get the idea of what's going on. Kendall, go ahead.
I see this all the time, because back up, I'm putting air quotes, back flexibility is very desirable right now, especially to a lot of younger dancers. And I think that's given the increasing demand of acrobatics work and higher, like prettier lines, like higher lines in ballet, or all styles actually. But what really like gets me is everyone refers to exercises like these, not everyone, but mostly what I see refers to these exercises as like back flexibility, and like, oh, she has like great back flexibility, but she like doesn't have enough strength. And what they're actually referring to is mobility in the joints, in your spine, mobility in your spine. So which is like a direct result of like the muscles and like your the like joint makeup and all of the things that there's more than just the bones basically. So you're still straight, like whenever you're extending your back into that position, you are using the strength of your muscles. But if you're talking about more flexibility in your back, that would be, for an example, like rounding your back. So what we actually want to be doing in order to do like a back bend or like a scorpion or needle, anything like that where you're extending your back, is more strength-based exercises that are not forcing your back into that position. Because in this photo here, you're using a band or like the bar or some kind of prop to be able to lift your chest up like that. But as soon as you let go, are you going to be able to hold it? No, probably not. It's just, yeah, like a pancake flat back down. So like, you're not going to be able to hold that. And so there's like this expectation of this is where you have to be, is all the way up into this extended position. But the reality of it is that if you were standing up and doing a cambray back, like you can't go all the way back there and be able to support your body while doing it. So that is where I see a lot of people struggle too, is the stability and the strength component. And if it's in that photo too, if they are getting into that position, like they're not really doing anything in that position, they're holding that stretch, but they're really lacking the mobility into, like, if they're struggling with that, they're really lacking the mobility to hold that position and lacking the mobility to be able to get into that position rather than just holding the stretch and forcing the stretch like that.
Yes, and I want to say that something that we have to keep in mind is that the job of our core is to stabilize the spine. So if you want more mobility in your back, you need to have a strong core. So I'm going to show you one of the exercises that I use for this.
And that exercise too is focused like predominantly on glutes and hamstrings, but you are still like strengthening the lower back. But when you're thinking about the glutes and hamstrings a little bit more, you're able to stabilize your core and not round from the upper back, because that movement shouldn't just be the lower back doing all of the work. But a lot of times when people are forgetting, like if you are extending your back into it like an arched position, I always teach to engage your glutes, like if you're in a back bend or if you're in a scorpion, like using your glutes and hamstrings. Because if you arch your back here and you're trying to lift the leg behind you, you can't lift the leg up behind you without strengthening, without using the glutes and hamstrings. So that's a component that a lot of people miss, I feel like. And we just, in order to get like a needle, for instance, I'm using that example because I have a lot of dancers that come to me wanting to work on that. And we really don't do a whole lot of back exercises. I mean, we do, but I focus more on the glutes and hamstrings first, because that's how you're going to actually get your leg higher.
Yes, I agree. And honestly, you covered the topic very well. I don't have anything else to add. So let's go ahead and move into picture number 5. So as you see in this picture, this dancer is using ankle weights. This is one of the examples. They're doing some exercises in because they want to get the legs higher. And a lot of times we see teachers encouraging dancers to use ankle weights during the whole class.
So this exercise, I see a lot of like recommendations on social media to like do this exercise for that, or do this exercise as like a warm up before class. And these recommendations from people that may not have the qualifications to be able to give you those recommendations safely and effectively. And that's why it's important to know who you're getting your information from, who you're getting your exercises from, and if they're explaining like what this exercise is good for and why, because there's a lot of misinformation out there in the dance world too. So I've seen this exercise being used for like getting a higher extension, or I don't know what else, like a higher batma or anything like that when you're bringing your leg to the front. So when you're putting ankle weights down there, down at your ankle, and you have your leg straight out in front of you, you're putting the weight, think of it as like a lever. You're putting the weight on the farthest end of the lever. So yeah, it's going to feel harder, but it's going to put more stress on your knee because your knee's right in the middle. If you were to put a weight like on your thigh or like right above your knee, you might actually be able to target your quads and your core a little bit more. Now, the other thing I see with this exercise is that it's very, like we were doing earlier with the RDL, is a lot of dancers tend to round their back or they will arch their back, but there's not really much emphasis on like finding the neutral position. And if you are arching your back too much and you're trying to lift the leg, you might end up using your lower back to try to lift the leg and try to like I don't even know how to explain it, but just kind of like moving your torso as you lift the leg. And then at that point, you're not really using the right muscles, or you're not stabilizing with the right muscles. And then the same thing, if you are tucked under too much, your core is engaged, but you're not. At that point, usually what happens when you're tucked under is your upper body rounds too. So now you're not thinking about upper back stabilization. So those are some examples of for something like this. The stabilization part is what's really, really important, because if you were to stand up and do a double pate at the front and your back is arched, you're probably not going to be able to balance that well. Same thing if your back is rounded, or if you're like leaning to one side, like it's very easy to cheat in this position. So you have to be really paying attention to the full body components of every exercise. Really, every exercise is a full body exercise if you're thinking about the stability and what's happening in the body. Even if it's like an isolation exercise for one muscle group, there's still other muscle groups that are working too. So that's always good to keep in mind.
I think that this idea of using ankle weights to get the legs higher comes because they think about, okay, I'm gonna put your ankle weights, and when you kick into your Batman, all of your muscles are going to be working against your resistance. So when I take the ankle weight off, your leg is going to go up so easy and it's going to feel a lot of freedom. And that's truth in terms of sensations, but I do believe that we should not use ankle weights in order to get the legs higher. Because as you say, first of all, a dancer has to understand how to articulate the hip. So if you put ankle weights when this dancer doesn't know, doesn't have the foundation yet, then the dancer is going to be overusing the muscles that it's already um, engaging incorrectly or it's already using incorrectly. And this is why many dancers experience inflammation or have a sore hip. So I'm going to show you these exercises because the key is step back control and dynamic core stability. So if we have this, then our psoas is actually going to be working as a hip flexor.
And it doesn't even have to be all the way up to, you could lift the leg and like hover it off the floor and like start there and then make it higher, as you're getting stronger too. So that's a good way to progress it.
Yeah, and a lot of times dancers are disappointed because they tell you, "Hey, I need help. I want higher extensions." And you're like, "Okay, so let me help you." And then you do an evaluation and then you give the recommendation of exercises and you're working in, okay, your core has to be stronger, there has to be more stability here, and then you have them doing these side planks and reverse planks and they're like, "How is this going to help me to get my legs higher?"
But then they're by the end of your session, they're like mind blown because they're like, oh, wow, like it feels so much easier to lift my leg. Yes, that's the goal. Now it's going to feel easier right now in this hour because we did some exercises for that. But if you go try this again tomorrow to lift your leg without doing exercises, then probably not going to be as high as it was yesterday. But it's the consistency of the strength and the flexibility or whatever your body needs. It's the consistency of those other training modalities that is going to actually like help you lift your leg higher, for instance, consistently and actually make that change in your body, because it's not just going to happen with one session or like one set of exercises. And that also doesn't mean to do these exercises every day too. No matter what's, if you're working with a trainer or a physical therapist or a strength coach or anybody who's giving you exercises to practice, if you're doing them every single day, that's going to lead to overtraining. It's going to lead to burnout, and it's not going to help you actually get stronger. At that point, you're not giving your muscles enough time to recover and actually rebuild to get stronger. So I always say like 3 times a week is perfect. Even doing 2 times a week is enough to start to seeing some changes. And then from there, like evolving the programming with your trainer, and you're gonna be able to feel the difference. But I think a lot of dancers, whenever we get these exercises, I've heard this too from some of the dancers I've worked with. They'll come back to me and tell me, I've been doing these exercises every single day and it's been helping. Like, okay, well, that's great that it's been helping and you've been doing them every day, but it's one, not really sustainable to be doing it every day. You're probably not going to have the time to do them every day for the rest of your life. And it's also, eventually your body is going to adapt to those exercises. So if you're not constantly, like, not constantly, but if you're not changing the training protocol and switching things up and allowing your body to adapt to new uh, demands, then you're just going to get really good at doing those exercises. And you're not actually going to be developing strength in the areas that you need for functional movement.
And this is why there are a lot of progressions, there are a lot of variations. That doesn't mean that everyone gets to start from the same point. You can have a class of 10 students and they all might know the same steps. They all might know pas de bourrée and glissade and arabesque, but physically, we all are different. And we go back to the same. Evaluation is really important because in that way, we're going to be able to tell where you are and what's the next goal and how you can get there.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was going to say, even for these like exercises that you showed us with your student, those are not going to be like for every single person, or it's not going to be like a very clean, like equal translation or I guess uh, alternative exercise. Like you might need a different alternative exercise based on your body. So it's all relative. And that's why it's hard to not follow like a cookie cutter recipe. And you can do that and you can see changes, but it's going to depend on your body as well. And if you don't have someone there to like be telling you do this, do that, or maybe modify this position or whatever it is, then it's going to actually like plateau your progress at some point.
Exactly. And for those of you that haven't had the experience of work with a personal trainer or a dance coach, like this is your sign. And Kendall, thank you so much. Thank you so much for this collaboration. And why don't you tell us if you have any workshops or events coming soon?
So I know I was just talking about like cookie cutter programs and cookie cutter exercises. And I my programs that I offer, I have one for turns and one for leaps. And I wouldn't consider them to be cookie cutter programs because I offer a like a live drop-in session and like access to me for feedback. Like you can upload videos and things like that if you're struggling with something. So I always try to give that option to dancers as well who are enrolled in my programs. And it's been great because, I even had one dancer that joined me a couple weeks ago for our drop-in session and just practicing her turns. She was, I think, on like week 5 or 6 of the turns program and was really like already feeling the difference. And it was just a couple little tweaks that I gave her, a couple little tips, and it already made a world of difference, so that was really cool to see. But I have 2 programs, they're 12 weeks each. You're not obligated to stay in it for 12 weeks. You can sign up and try it out for the month. But it's a monthly subscription program too. So you're able to get the exercises, videos, and tips for each exercises. There's two workouts per week. And they're probably about like 30 to 45 minutes. It doesn't take that long to do a workout. And that's another, I think, common misconception is that you have to be working out for 2 hours in order for it to count. And that's totally not true. You can make so much progress in just like 30-minute sessions a week, even. So, so I have that, and that's mostly geared for dancers. Although I do have a couple of dance teachers who use the program for their students as well, for their classes. And then for dance teachers, I actually have an anatomy for dancers online course. And some of the stuff that we were even talking about today made me think of it because we were talking about like which muscles you're using for these positions and, the mobility versus flexibility or the ligaments and tendons that are attaching like into the ankle joint. So all of those things I teach in my anatomy course to help dance teachers understand the human body a little bit more and also be able to teach safe practices because they have that foundational knowledge. So that is a course that is completely self-paced, and you can find all of this information on my website or through my Instagram account too, if you're interested in doing some continuing education and really helping your dancers and helping elevate your teaching practices.
Well, there you go. And I hope you guys really take advantage of these opportunities. And I just want to say that on my end, unfortunately, my workshops and events are only available in Spanish, but I do personal training online and in person for English and Spanish speakers. Kendall, why don't you tell us where we can follow you on social media?
So my social media, my Instagram would probably be the best place for people to go. And that is at Train with Kendall. And then my website is bodyconnect.org, which is the name of my company. So body, BODY, and then connect, KINECT.org. And on there, you can find everything about like my one-on-one sessions, my online classes, the programs, the courses, all of that stuff is just on the website too.
Kendall, thank you again for this collaboration, and I really hope that this is really relevant for the dance community. And guys, let us know if you have any questions or if there's something that you want us to talk about. Just let us know and follow us on social media.
I hope a lot of dancers and dance teachers that watch this will take something away and kind of reassess the way they're training, if they are doing these exercises or these stretches, and then understand a little bit more about their bodies too.